She grew up obeying rules. Rules she never realized were meant to be broken instead of her spirit, housed in the confines of don't do this and never ever, ever do that. Pruned by discipline, her individual stems of self were martyred to the traditions of good little girls who spoke only when spoken to, quietly dressed wounds they were never allowed to bleed out of, and racked up penance for cravings imagined in the envious stares that surrounded her. And this is how she would become perfect. And really, that's the only way she would be considered worth anything. Her goals were always set by someone else's hands. The same hands that believed in pushing her forward by knocking her down, teaching her that delivery guarantees immunity only sometimes. That nothing is set in stone except for Mama's belt and Papi's resentment. And if she was going to make it, she needed to be strong. And they were going to make sure she was strong. And they were going to make sure she got somewhere. They were going to make sure she had better than they did. And they were going to hate her for it. Ignorantly reinforcing their faith in her with family heirlooms of clenched fists drawn round and tight like the cycle they tried to break over her head again and again and again until the bruises sunk in like lessons well learned. A method as useless as trying to teach her that the sky was the limit by painting clouds on a ceiling that inevitably closed her in, mocking symbols of possibility that never moved. They never went anywhere. They only hung above her head, waiting to be forgotten. So she spoke only when spoken to. And she quietly dressed wounds that she was never allowed to bleed out of, and racked up penance for cravings she willfully played behind her eyes, not realizing all the while that habits are cultured in repetition. That even as she sat up in bed at night promising herself she'd be different with her little girl, she was tossing and turning in a chrysalis of expectations, tempered to emerge the monster she vowed would not be reborn in her. Its mouth open and familiar, snarling disappointment, intent on snapping at the heels of spontaneously spirited children, keeping them in line. Claws sharpening her young one's skills of silently tending wounds and feigning penance for rainy days dripping with prideful sin. Grasping at children like hope, like second chances to control what she never had, devouring any affection laid out to nurture them, wrapping them instead in the consistent warmth of anger and the dependability of structure. I've been told, she was a different person before we were born. I've been told that all she ever wanted was the best for us, and so I grew up obeying rules. Thanks.